UFC Vegas 57 betting and DraftKings show. We got 12 fights this Saturday. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off, we have Jinh Yu Frey coming in as a sizable favorite at minus 260. The comeback on Vanessa Demopoulos is plus 220. And as scary as it is to see big chalk on women's MMA, especially after last week seeing Jasmine Jasudavicius, and now we're seeing another big price tag on low-level women's MMA, but I have to say that Jinh Yu Frey really has the tools to win this fight. Am I laying minus 260? Absolutely not. But against a fighter like Vanessa Demopoulos, who is so one-dimensional in terms of her grappling, yes, she is a dangerous submission grappler if she can get you on the mat. The problem is her wrestling's not that good, and Jinh Yu Frey, historically very good takedown defense, and she should be the stronger fighter. She should have a clear striking advantage, and even though she doesn't throw a ton of volume, and I don't rate her super highly, she should be able to lean on that Muay Thai striking background. And Demopoulos, we know from the regional scene, is a punching bag on the feet. She doesn't have much in the striking, so it's like she has to somehow force a grappling exchange. I don't hate a shot on like the Hail Mary sub at a big number, but outside of that, I mean, Jinh Yu Frey should really get her hand raised here. The question is on DraftKings, 9,200, is she going to be able to pay off that salary? I don't think so. I actually would rate her the worst in terms of the 9K range, so I'm going to have little to none of Jinh Yu Frey on DraftKings on a 12-fight slate. I think there's just better fighters to target. Next fight up in the bantamweight division, we have Mario Batista coming in as a minus 160 favorite. The comeback on Brian Boom Kelleher is plus 140, and I got to say, I like the underdog Brian Kelleher in this spot. I think Mario Batista is a solid prospect, and he does have a lot of tools that we can get excited about, but at the same time, there's definitely holes that I think a guy like Brian Kelleher can take advantage of. For starters, Batista's striking defense is not the greatest. We've seen him get clipped against Trevin Jones, and Brian Kelleher does have power. He's got good counter striking. He's got a nice check left hook. I think Kelleher could potentially hurt Batista on the feet. And if Batista goes for those takedowns, he typically likes to mix in the takedowns. I think he could be susceptible to getting choked out by Kelleher's patented guillotine here. So give me Kelleher. And what's interesting is scorecards, no action, which means if the fight goes the full 15 minutes, it's a push. But if there is a finish on either sside, Brian Kelleher's a dog in that market, which I think is just completely wrong. I just recently started betting these props. I've only bet 2 so far, 2-0. So I will plug that. You know, I was on Chase Hooper. He was a dog in that market. And I was on Lucas Almeida, who was also a dog in the finish-only markets. Brian Kelleher's a dog in the finish-only markets, and I just think that's wrong. Because if there is a finish on either side, I think it comes from the Kelleher side. So give me the veteran, hoping he gets it done on Saturday. Business is booming. Next fight up in the flyweight division, we have JP Buys coming in as a slight favorite at minus 115. The comeback on Cody Durden is minus 105. And this is a fight where I think both of these guys are very similar in a sense, in that they both are primarily wrestlers. Buys more of a grappler. I do think he's got the submission grappling advantage in this fight. Neither guy's really a great striker, and I think they both have cardio concerns. So I think it's lined about right. I would actually flip it. I'd say Durden ever so slightly should be the favorite here, really just because I expect him to have the early success in this fight. I do think he's probably a better wrestler. I do think he's more aggressive with his wrestling. He averages over 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, and I do actually think he'll have a slight striking edge. I don't rate either guy striking very highly, but I at least know Durden is going to throw in volume, and I think he could have success with those leg kicks, which we've seen him implement in multiple UFC fights now. So the biggest issue is the gas tank, because like I said, I think both guys have concerns there. I think Durden is probably more of a concern in terms of the cardio. So it's just a fight that I could honestly see going either way. It's not a strong lean. Like I said, I trust Durden to be more active and probably win the minutes early in this fight. But if Buys ended up surprising us, looking much better, fighting for his job, recently off a divorce, you know, I wouldn't be surprised either. So, yeah, should be a fun scrap at 125, but I'm going to slightly lean Durden. No bet for me either way. Next fight up, we have Sergey Morozov coming in as a minus 140 favorite. The comeback on Julian Paiva is plus 120, and this is the only bet that I've made so far. I backed Sergey Morozov minus 146 on FanDuel to win 1 unit, and I like Morozov here. I think it's a pretty easy, straightforward buy low spot on him. Obviously made his UFC debut against Umar Nurmagomedov, who we'll talk about later on this card. Not going to fault him too much there. Looked good against Khalid Taha. landed 6 takedowns in that fight, was able to avoid the power of Taha for the most part. And then most recently, that fight against Douglas Silva de Andrade, probably the best fight of the entire year. He looked really good early in the fight, nearly got the finish, and then obviously basically death gassed and then ate a bunch of really big shots, got dropped multiple times. I mean, it was so back and forth, ended up getting finished. But again, I'm not going to fault him too much in a fight that 9 times out of 10, that fight's going to be stopped. And against almost anybody else, that fight would have been stopped. It would have been a stoppage victory for him. I just think he has a lot of skills that I can count on here. He's a pretty skilled striker. He does have some power, doesn't throw a ton of volume, but it's really the grappling, right? Like, he averages over 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's a pretty decent grappler himself. Where he struggles is against people who are better at grappling, like Umar Nurmagomedov, that fight that I mentioned previously. Julian Paiva is not that guy. And a lot of the skills, a lot of the attributes that I rated highly for Julian Paiva coming into the UFC was at 125. Now in the bantamweight division, he's kind of just another guy, in my opinion. You know, he doesn't throw a ton of volume out there. He's a technical striker, not a ton of power. He's an okay grappler, but basically throws up submissions off his back. That's not going to work against a guy like Morozov here. I think the takedowns are going to be the difference. So give me Morozov. Like I said, I backed him at the money line. I think he's an okay play on DraftKings as well, because if Paiva is going to be that squirrely fighter that works back to his feet, I think we can see Morozov land 3, 4, and even 5 takedowns in this fight. So give me Morozov. Give me Morozov on DraftKings. Let's get it. Next fight up is TJ Brown, a -210 favorite. The comeback on Shailenan Nurdenbeki is +180. And this is a fight where I really just think it's TJ Brown's fight to lose. And he's pretty good at losing fights, even when he's winning. We've seen that multiple times with him. And that's really the concern, is that he pushes a tough pace. The durability and the cardio doesn't always seem to support that type of pace. So it's really just he needs to avoid getting clipped on the feet here against a guy like Shailenan, who typically low volume on the feet, super low volume, looks to cage push, looks to peel you to the ground. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against TJ Brown. And if it does hit the mat, I significantly favor TJ Brown's grappling. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, multiple submissions on his record. I just think he's kind of better everywhere. I expect him to have the striking advantage. Like I said, it basically just comes down to, can he avoid blowing this fight in a fight that I expect him to be winning up until the point where maybe he blows it. But I don't think he does here. Like I said, this is really his fight to lose, and I don't think he does. Next fight's in the light heavyweight division. We have Carlos Ulberg going up against Tayfon Nchukwu. This one's currently a pick'em, and I have to say, I do think Tayfon is probably the side here. That's a play that I'm definitely eyeing up and might have one come Saturday, depending on where the line moves. But I know Tayfon was plus money early. Shout out to those that got in early on the plus money. I do think that was a great bet. I just think it's a close fight. I expect the striking to be competitive, but I do think over the course of 15 minutes, it's got to favor Tayfon Nchukwu here. I think he's much better defensively. I think he's going to have more success in the boxing range against Carlos Ulberg, who historically blows his load early in this fight. You know, and we saw against Fabio Cherant his last time out, he kind of managed his pace and cardio a little bit better because I think he was so scared he was going to gas out again. But against Tayfon Nchukwu, he's a guy who's very solid defensively, as opposed to Ulberg, who's extremely hittable, basically disregards his defense completely, fights with his hands down a lot of times against a guy who does have power like Tayfon Nchukwu, who also would have a wrestling edge if he chooses to implement it. I just think all the upside is on the Tayfon side here. Give me Tayfon, most likely by decision, but a knockout wouldn't surprise me if Ulberg does gas out again. So give me Tayfon Nchukwu. Next fight up, we have Chris Curtis, -135 favorite, going up against Rodolfo Vieira on the comeback at +115. And this is a really fun fight. I would be shocked if this fight ends up going a full 15 minutes. I don't think anybody thinks it will. But I do think that both guys have a real path to victory here. Obviously, on the Chris Curtis side, he's going to need to keep the fight on the feet. Historically speaking, he's had pretty strong takedown defense in the UFC, and he's been able to knock out both of the guys he's faced, Phil Hawes and then Brendan Allen. I picked against him in both of those spots. I don't think I bet either of those guys because they were pretty big favorites, but either way, this guy's proved me wrong multiple times. I wouldn't be surprised if he proved me wrong again, but I'm going with my guy Rodolfo Vieira. Not super confident in it. I'm going to be hedging it on DraftKings just because I think this fight is probably the one where we could circle saying this fight is going to score well regardless of who wins. Obviously on the Curtis side, I think if he wins, it's coming by knockout inside the first 2 rounds. And on the Vieira side, he may only need 1 takedown. Yes, the takedown might be difficult, but Vieira, when he's able to time his entries, he's got a strong double leg takedown. I think he can take Curtis to the mat. He's just so dangerous, world-class grappling. I think he might only need 1 takedown if he does get it to the mat. So I tend to lean with him, even though anytime you back this guy, it's always super sweaty, because in terms of the striking, he's very, very hittable. He tends to make all of his fights sweaty, even when he's a big favorite. And now we're getting a value price tag on him here as a small underdog. But I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he eats a couple big punches here, and that typically happens before he goes to his best asset, which is the grappling. But once he gets it to the mat, I think he is a real shot to submit Chris Curtis here. So give me Vieira by submission, plus 195, not a terrible price tag in what is very likely his win condition. But like I said, I'm mainly going to be hedging it on DraftKings, but we're going with the slight underdog in Vieira this week. And next up, we have my guy Umar Nurmagomedov coming in as the biggest favorite on the card at minus 900. The comeback on Nate Maness is plus 625. And this one I don't have to spend a lot of time on, because just like pretty much everybody else, I think Umar Nurmagomedov is a future title contender here, and I think a future champion. So I don't have to lay it on you to explain how good this guy really is. It's not just the high-level grappling that he has in his back pocket. It's the striking as well. You know, you see the arsenal of kicking attack. He's very powerful. He always has his opponents guessing. I just think he's better than Nate Maness in every single area of mixed martial arts. And on the Nate Maness side, I talked about Chris Curtis, how I picked against him. I've never bet against him, but I picked against him wrong every time. Nate Maness is a guy who I've actually bet against every single time, and he's burned me because I was on Johnny Muniz there. Controversial decision. I know he lost a point. I thought Muniz did enough to win. Obviously, Maness got his hand raised. And then Tony Gravely had the dude basically finished at the end of the round, and then he comes back and ends up getting finished himself. So this guy's burned me multiple times. He's not burning me against my guy Umar Nurmagomedov. The problem is the price tag. You can't even parlay this because it's so heavy. I'd rather look at the inside the distance on Umar Nurmagomedov, which is like anywhere from minus 150 to minus 160. I'm probably not even going to bet that myself. What I'm really considering is the under. I like the under 2.5 for sure. I think BetOnline had a minus 140 earlier today. Shout out to my guy Danny Lags, who posted that on Twitter. But also the under 1.5, you can get slight plus money on under 1.5, and I really think Umar has a good chance to submit this guy inside 1 round. And at 9,500 on DraftKings, yes, it's a lot of money to pay, but on a 12-fight slate where we don't absolutely love the rest of that 9K range, I'm okay with getting to enough Nurmagomedov on the slate, at least to be field average, just because I do think, even though it's 9,500, I think he has a pretty decent shot at being in the optimal, but we'll see what happens. I like my guy Umar to get it done. Next fight up, we have Thiago Moises trying to get back in the win column after back-to-back losses. He's a minus 255 favorite in what should be a favorable matchup against Christos Giagos on the comeback at plus 215. And I just really have a hard time seeing how Giagos wins this fight. And it's not that I think Moises is some super killer or anything like that, but I do think, stylistically speaking, he should have all the advantages here against Christos Giagos. Giagos is a guy who's very low volume on the feet. I don't think he has enough power or volume to consistently win minutes against Thiago Moises, who's a guy who is historically very durable. And Moises is a much better grappler. He's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Despite him not being aggressive in getting it to the mat, he only averages 1 takedown per 15 minutes. Giagos typically looks to grapple and look for takedowns himself. If he does that here against Moises, I think he could get submitted here. And then the last thing I'll say is the cardio edge, I think, really favors Thiago Moises. So give me Moises. I know it's a big price tag to pay. I'm not betting him myself. I don't know if he has a ton of round 1 finishing upside, so I'm probably going to stay away for the most part on DraftKings, but I do think he does enough to get his hand raised. So give me Moises on Saturday. He should get the job done. Next fight up in the heavyweight division, we have Alan Badeau coming in as a small favorite at minus 115 against Josh Parisian on the comeback at minus 105. And for whatever reason, people are loving this fight. I've seen so many people, and it seems like most of the love is on the Alan Badeau side. Let's not forget, like, this is the same dude who, coming into the UFC, he was credited with a win after getting knocked out on the regional scene, and then he got flatlined by Tom Aspinall, within the first round. I don't think this guy's very good. And yes, he did look much better against Parker Porter, even won the third round, I believe, in that fight. Came in through some high volume. The striking looked pretty decent. But against Josh Parisian, I think Parisian's really similar. He's a heavyweight fighter who can throw in volume, pretty durable himself. I think he's got the durability edge. Neither guy's really going to look to grapple. So I just don't really think you can have a strong, confident read on who's going to win this fight. I think it has a wide range of outcomes. I think both guys have potential to knock each other out. I think if there is a finish, it probably comes from the Parisian side. More than likely, though, I could see this one being like a sloppy 15-minute fight where both guys are gassed going into the last round, and it just ends up being like what it comes down to, who wins the last minute wins the fight, something like that. Just not something that I want to have a ton of money tied up in. So I'll lean Parisian, but it's not a confident lean. Like I said, I don't see Badeau as being a guy who I can confidently put money on in the UFC. Next fight up, we have Shavkat Rakhmonov coming in as a minus 390 favorite. The comeback on the veteran Neil Magny at plus 320. And this one is pretty straightforward. I think maybe a couple years ago, Magny would have had a real chance, and I'd be considering a bet here as a big underdog. But I just can't do it. Not this version of Neil Magny. You know, he's 35 years old or whatever. I just don't think he's looked as good recently over his last couple fights, to where I just think Rakhmonov's going to have a clear athleticism and strength advantage here. I think he's got a ton more finishing upside, 15-0. All 15 wins have come inside the distance. I just think the guy is pretty dangerous wherever the fight goes. He's obviously got a couple tight chokes, but he's got power on the feet as well. And I think that's what's going to be the difference here. Neil Magny, he's got a decent jab. He can mix in the takedowns. He's a decent grappler. I just think the speed and power and the athleticism is what I keep going back to on the Rakhmonov side, and I don't really trust the durability of Neil Magny like I used to. So give me Rakhmonov. I think he probably finds a finish here on Saturday. Which brings us to our main event. We have Arman Tsarukyan, a minus 295 favorite. The comeback on Mateusz Gamrot is plus 245. And this is a really fun main event for starters. I think these guys are easily two of the best fighters in the division going at it. Two exciting prospects. I do like the Tsarukyan side. Tsarukyan, for my money, is probably a top 5 guy already. Obviously, he had the debut against Islam Makhachev, looked a lot better than people expected on short notice, but he just has all the tools. You know, he averages over 3.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's got solid grappling. He's got solid striking, power in his striking. He's been showing off his finishing ability lately with back-to-back knockout victories, and I just think he's so fast and so difficult to deal with, whether at range or when he's in close, he's smothering on top of you. I think Mateusz Gamrot has the high-level wrestling, averages just about 6 takedowns per 15 minutes, and this is a big price to pay on Tsarukyan. But if Gamrot, if he's able to land those takedowns, and I'm not even fully convinced that he will be able to, but if he does, Tsarukyan's a guy that's historically very difficult to control. He's very good at working back to his feet. And recently, the judges really haven't been rating takedowns with no ground and pound and not much control time. So I just don't see how Gamrot is going to be able to win that style of fight against Tsarukyan. I think for Gamrot to win, he's going to have success in the striking, which is certainly possible. Gamrot's striking is not bad whatsoever, and to his credit, he's got knockout power himself. I keep going back to the advantages for Tsarukyan, really just the all-around well-roundedness of his game, and I do think he's just very difficult to deal with that range. I think he's going to give Gamrot problems over 25 minutes and potentially find a late finish himself. So give me Tsarukyan. I'm not betting him at that price. I'd actually be closer to betting Gamrot, just because I do think the line is a little bit wide here. But in terms of DraftKings, I'll have a little bit of exposure to both sides. Definitely leaning towards the Tsarukyan side. It's going to be a heavy ownership on DraftKings, as most main events are, but I'm okay with being about field average on the Tsarukyan side, maybe even a little bit overweight on the Gamrot side, depending on where his ownership comes in at. And as always, guys, you'll be able to check ownership projections, DraftKings player rankings, line movement, fantasy points per minute, all that stuff. It's completely free on my website, fightnumbers.com. Check it out. And if you didn't already, like this video and subscribe to my channel. I definitely appreciate it, guys. It takes 2 seconds and it helps me out a lot. Best of luck, and we'll see you next time.